Welcome, Ray Cornell, to the Empathy Edge podcast. I'm so excited to talk to a very like-minded marketer and brander. So welcome to the show to talk to us a little bit about the psychology of buying and the
Yeah.
psychology of a savvy buyer, because you and I, as we were just discussing before we started rolling tape, that's really dating myself. Before we started recording, is that, empathy is such a key ingredient to that success. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me, Maria.
So, tell us a little bit about how you even got into this work and, how you got into this work of helping brands and companies really connect and engage with their ideal clients and customers.
Yeah, I mean, now we're talking about infusing empathy into marketing, but I actually come from a world where empathy is ground one. That's job day one, 101, lesson one, first thing you have to do. I come from the world of psychology. So
Perfect.
I was on track to be a counselor in the prison system, and I worked as a substance abuse and corrections counselor in a mental hospital, a substance abuse rehab facility, a community counseling center. And I won't go into the whole long story of how I burned out on the mental health world,
I
but I
can
did.
imagine. Yeah.
And I loved working with people. I loved the people I was working with. My specialty was behavior change for really deeply ingrained behaviors. But it was the bureaucracy and the red tape of the industry that I couldn't get my head around.
Hmm.
So all the while I was working on my 3 degrees and this career and everything, I was working as a freelance writer on the side. So when I decided to leave the mental health world, I threw myself full on into freelance writing. And now I've been working in the marketing industry for 18 years, and I've built a full service content marketing agency based on the psychology of behavior change. So we layer those psychological models into everything that we do.
I love it. This is so juicy. We're going to have such a great conversation. So, thank you for sharing that. And to just give us some grounding, what is the psychology? I guess maybe what's the psychology of a savvy buyer? But
Yeah.
also, are there different types of psychologies of different buyers we need to be aware of? Like, we're not always talking to the savvy buyer, right? So I guess that's the ideal state is we're talking to someone who is like on board with what we do and what we sell and they get it. What is that psychology like?
Yeah, so you exactly to your point, you have to first know who am I talking to. And the funny thing is, whether you're in B2B or B2C, you often have different audiences.
Mhm.
So, for example, in the world of B2B, particularly things like tech and these large purchases that companies are making because they think it's going to advance their revenue or allow them to scale quickly or whatever the case may be, you're not always talking to the decision maker. And a lot of
Hmm.
marketers don't understand that. They think they have to go right for the decision maker, but really that person doesn't get involved until very late in the buying process. And so what's lacking in the marketing world is this understanding of what I call the gatekeeper. And there's a zillion different terms out there for this person, but
Yeah.
essentially it's the person who has been tasked with finding a solution to the company's problem and presenting a short list to the decision maker. And it's
Hmm.
that person who you have to prioritize understanding their psychology, their level of education and what you have to offer, their level of readiness and savviness as well.
Hmm.
So when we talk about the savvy buyer, typically we're referring to either one of two things. One is they're savvy to what you're selling, so they're very educated. They've already, been in the industry for 10 plus years. They have a pre-set shortlist in their mind that they want to go to, and you either have to break into that or hold your spot in that. Another version of the savvy buyer is this person who's hip to the jive of sales tactics.
Oh yeah.
So when
Yeah.
you're on a sales team and you're doing cold outreach, you're using Zoom info, you're using all these tools to try and automate your lead gen,
Hmm.
you are really disappointing people if you're doing what everyone has already experienced and they already sense is a sales tactic.
Hmm. Oh my gosh. I love what you're saying because when I've worked with my branding clients that especially in tech, that's the point you have to get them to, right? All of them say, "Oh, our ideal client is the CFO or the CIO." And it's like, "Great. that's not going to be the first person that comes in contact with your sales team or your brand or is going to the trade show or is
Right.
attending the webinars, right? It's the people, like you said, it's also the influencers, like who's
Yeah.
influencing that decision. And I love what you said about the gatekeepers, because those are
Mhm.
the people that are being tasked by those C-suite leaders or
Yes.
VPs to do the research. So you need to be speaking to them. And if you're speaking to them in a way that says they're unimportant, they're going to
Right.
know, right? They need their needs met before they can sort of run you up the chain to actually get to the decision maker that signs the check and signs the contract. So I
Exactly.
love what you said there. The other thing I often hear a lot, which I'd be interested from you, is because I do work with tech companies when I do brand projects, is the whole, well, you can't market to IT, you can't market to developers
Mm.
or programmers because they're on to the BS. Like you can't BS them. And I'm like, it's not about BSing them, it's about communicating with them. But
Right.
also, like we were talking about as well, they're human beings as well. And they have logic drivers and emotion drivers. And just
Right.
because they're very logical thinkers doesn't mean just presenting features and functions to them is going to be enough to convince. So can you talk a little bit about that, that psychology of I guess the skeptical buyer and how you work with your clients to get to connect with those people, to engage
Yeah.
them?
I love that you are using this term, the skeptical buyer, because I feel like that's what everyone is nowadays. And yet
Mhm.
nobody's talking about that. Everyone is doing their marketing and their cold pitching and their advertising as if the person
Mhm.
on the other end is not skeptical, is not smart, is not savvy. So
Mhm.
this is a great example. So the skeptical buyer, you mentioned that some people will say, oh, you can't market to IT people, you can't market to the skeptical buyer. No, you just can't pitch the skeptical buyer, but you can win them over. And here's the
Mhm.
thing, you have to first set aside the fact that, okay, if they're skeptical, the one thing you can't do is try to sell them.
Right.
Everyone who is skeptical, everyone nowadays, and research even shows this, that 70% of the B2B buying process is done before anyone is ready to talk to a sales rep. They've
Mhm.
already done their research. They've educated themselves. They've learned the lingo. They've learned the scope of what's available out there. They're looking at what is within their budget and what competitors are pricing their services and their options at. So if 70% of the buying process is done before someone's willing to speak to a sales rep, how are you supposed to connect with them? They
Mhm.
want to come to you. They want to feel like it's their decision to choose you. And so the only thing you can do to win them over is be helpful. That is
Mhm.
the only thing you can do. You can offer content, you can offer updates, you can offer insights, you can offer examples of, hey, we just went through the ringer of helping this client because Google decided to turn the world on its head. And now we're implementing this solution. You guys can use it too.
Mhm.
Be altruistic. Understand and this is where empathy comes in. You have to
Mhm.
understand the situation that they're in before they want to buy your solution. You have to
Mhm.
understand every pain point that they experience up until that point of readiness
Mhm.
and create solutions, create helpful content or tools or connections or communities for them,
Mhm.
understanding that you're not going to get them as a buyer for months, possibly even years, but when they are ready, you're
Mhm.
going to be at the top of their shortlist. This is
I
the way
love
the
that.
world's evolving.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not about giving it all away. That's
Right.
always the objection I hear about that. And what I like to tell my clients is if you can give all your knowledge and value away in a 1 hour webinar, maybe you need to be doing something else. Because if
Yes.
that if that's the extent of everything that you can offer them, then we have a problem. But really,
Yes.
it's also about, I think, empathy for this is what I've learned in lead gen. There's people who will take the content and never do anything else. And you just have
Exactly.
to account for that. They're the people that are going to take the free resources. They're going to watch the webinars. They're going to read the solution briefs. They're going to, consume all the content and try to do it on their own. Then there are the people who are going to consume all the content and realize this is harder than I thought,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not going to have time for this, or I'm going to need some advice and support as I go through this. And those are the people you're going to attract with all that quote unquote free content you're putting out into the
Exactly.
world. So it's getting marketing folks over that hump of understanding that you have to have empathy for the different type of buyer, whether they're a DIY or do they want it done for them.
Right. I'm glad that you said that because it reminds me of this company. So I attended SaaS Talk earlier this year, and Imperative was there and they did a few talks, and I was blown away by
Hmm.
Daniel, the speaker. He is so knowledgeable. And the funny thing is, so many clients that I work with, they say, well, how are we supposed to attribute demand generation, early brand awareness, or branding at all to closed won deal dollars?
Yeah.
Well, that is something that C-suite leaders often think, oh, that should be easy. You should just be able to tag people or cookies or
No.
whatever the case may be. Daniel at Imperative did this amazing talk where he showed all of the stages that you have to go through when using their tool, which is designed to do exactly this. He walked you through the entire process in a 2-hour workshop
Hmm.
where he was showing, okay, this is how you go from data tracking to identifying leads to then conglomerating those into accounts to then
Hmm.
funneling them into opportunities and pipeline and so on.
Hmm.
And by doing that, not only did he validate the C-suite idea that this should be possible, but also he showed empathy for the marketers in the room who were tasked with doing this by revealing just how complicated this is.
Hmm.
And then he convinced, without having to tell us to buy or be persuasive in any way, shape, or form, he convinced the entire room that Imperative is the best at this because they understand the complexity of this process. So
Hmm.
it was like this threefold amazing demonstration,
Hmm.
carrying empathy all the way through to satisfy all different perspectives who
Hmm.
have a stake in marketing attribution.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, and that's, because all of my empathy work came initially from doing marketing and brand strategy work. That was where I
Mm.
really saw the power of empathy and not just fake empathy, but really, like you said, understanding where someone is and being able to provide a solution to alleviate a pain point or help them achieve a benefit of some
Yep.
sort, right? Take
Yep.
away a pain or increase a pleasure.
Yes.
And I love that story because it goes to the fact that it's not necessarily just a numbers game. It's not necessarily just well, let's just use the same pitch on everybody and see who it sticks with.
Mm.
It's being able to discern who everyone is as an individual and who everyone is within their organization. And that requires empathy. That requires asking questions and listening to the answers. And this is why it's such a superpower of marketers who are successful versus the ones that are like, we're just going to play the numbers and this is going to hit, what's the old saying like even a broken clock is right
Yes.
twice a
Twice a
day or
day.
whatever. Yeah. So
Yes.
it's if you want to be efficient with your marketing dollars, and this is where you
Yeah.
get the CFO's attention, right? If you
Exactly.
want to
Yes.
spend less and do more and get more margin, get more ROI, empathy is the way to do it because you've got to slow down for a second and understand who these people are.
Yep.
So I love what you're saying. Of course, we're like preaching to the choir here. Um, so tell us about neurotransmitters. And because I
Yeah.
love your mix of your psychology background with the marketing that you're doing now. And what is that? And how does that unlock loyalty?
Yes. So every marketer has heard that in order to be successful in marketing, you need to have the know, like, and trust factor, right? But even though we all know that, we know that, oh, you have to get people to know about your brand. Then you have to get them to like your brand. Then you have to get them to trust your brand. We all know that, and everyone still goes, okay, but how do I do that?
Right.
With my background in psychology, I always look at everything through that lens of how do we build relationships and what's actually going on in the mind. And, when we feel feelings, those are actually chemical reactions going on in our brains and in our bodies. And so, if we look at the know, like, and trust factor from the perspective of neurotransmitters, it actually gives you this connection point to know exactly what to do to create that thing, whether it's know, like, or trust. So,
Mhm.
for example, if we're talking about first getting someone to know your brand, in order for someone to know you and feel like they have an understanding of who you are, what you do, what you offer, you want to activate dopamine. When you activate dopamine, you are going to be more memorable. You are going to have a positive association in their brain because dopamine makes us feel good. It makes us feel accomplished. It makes us feel like the gaps and the worry and the wondering in our heads, all those gaps are now filled in with the satisfaction of knowledge. So now that we know, okay, in order to get someone to know about us, we have to activate dopamine. Then we ask, how do we activate dopamine? You give them the answers to the questions they're asking. So if you look at the sales journey and you look very, very far to the left, very early on in the process, this is where someone is either not aware that they have the problem, or maybe they are aware they have the problem, but they're not sure if there's even a solution. This is where they're going to be typing in questions like, how do I get my team members to stay with us longer? How do I increase retention? How do I increase employee satisfaction and morale? They are going to Google, they are going to Reddit, they are going to LinkedIn, typing in those questions. If you create the content that answers those in a way that is, and we talked about, companies being afraid of giving away the farm, so to speak, but if you give them all the information they need to solve that one particular problem, you are activating dopamine in their brains. You are giving them all these pleasurable responses. And suddenly they have this subliminal positive connotation with your brand that
Yeah,
makes them feel good and wants to see you again.
right.
It brings them closer to you. So then you can then move on to the next stage, which is like.
And then what happens there? What role does I'm like fascinated with this.
Yeah.
What role do neurotransmitters play in that
Yes.
phase?
So at the like stage, this is where you want someone to have, and this is where sometimes we think of, okay, I'm getting my words out of order in my head. So because I'm getting all excited. I love talking
It's
about
all
this stuff.
good. It's all good.
So when you want someone to like your brand, you need to activate oxytocin.
Hmm.
Oxytocin is the bond building neurotransmitter.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, though, when we think of oxytocin, we think of romantic relationships, or
Or
oxytocin's claim.
maternal. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Hmm.
Oxytocin's claim to fame is mom and baby bonding and that
Hmm.
skin to skin contact. And yet, studies have shown that you can still activate oxytocin in someone's brain by forming social relationships with them. So and this is where empathy really comes into play. So if you want to activate oxytocin, which is the key to getting someone to like your brand,
Hmm.
you need to make sure they understand that you see them, you hear them, you understand them, you empathize with them, you get it. They are not alone.
Hmm.
When you do that, this is where you build that unbreakable bond between that buyer and your brand because
Right.
you are making them feel a sense of closeness that they have previously probably only neurochemically felt with their best friends, their spouse, their children.
Yeah.
And this is where you can really start to create those lifelong advocates for your brand
Hmm.
because you've shown that
Yeah.
you're not just trying to push features and benefits.
So is this where a lot of the emotional um, advertising and marketing comes in? Because when you were describing this, I instantly thought of different campaigns I've seen from years ago.
Mm.
Like years ago, I in my first branding book, I spoke about the impact of Nike's "If You Let Me Play" campaign, which was in the
Mm.
90s or maybe early 2000s, that showed young girls and it showed statistics around young girls who play sports and how they're less likely to be in an abusive relationship. They're
Ah,
less likely to, drop out of college. They're less, all these things that were not about sports apparel,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I felt such a connection with Nike because of that campaign. And then you think of like Dove Real Beauty, or you think
Yes.
about even, you know, cleaning products. I use Method cleaning products because I feel like they get me and they get my sassy, sarcastic sense of humor in their packaging or their. So is that what you're talking about? Is those decisions that create that emotional connection?
Exactly. And as
Okay.
marketers, you can reverse engineer this because marketers are amazingly good at seeing marketing tactics in other marketing. And
Yeah.
so exactly to your point, let's use the Nike example. If you feel this sense of, I just like Nike, I,
Yeah.
I just like them, like, man, they get it. Suddenly, they are going to stand out in your mind above Adidas and Lululemon and all the
Hmm.
other apparel companies. And why? Exactly to your point, they didn't talk about apparel. They didn't talk about its durability or its stretchiness or its
No.
easy washability, all those features and benefits. No,
Right.
they talked about the experience that you want to have. And in this case, if someone is a mother buying clothing for their daughter and the
Hmm.
mother wants their daughter to go on to be successful and independent and self-reliant, then this is the brand for her. This
Right.
brand can give her that positive self-image. It has
Right.
nothing to do with apparel, but you're understanding the mental angst going on in a mother's mind or
Hmm.
even in that daughter's mind, and you're empathizing with it. You're saying, we get it. We've had the same thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. And then let's get into the trust factor because then I want to talk about the dark side of this because I know people are
Yes.
thinking it if they're listening. So let's
Yes.
talk about the neurotransmitters when it comes to trust.
Yes. So trust is all about endorphins. So typically, when we think of endorphins, we think about, oh, I just ran the mile and it feels so good, or I just
Uh-huh.
did some hard gardening work and it feels great. Endorphins, even though those are examples of things that we do physically with our bodies that yield endorphins, endorphins can also be generated when someone has this almost like ego boost of accomplishment.
Yeah.
And this is where you start to trust a brand. So, for example, I worked with a company that was great at doing this. They are a CPR training platform, and their whole goal was to get companies that need to train large groups of people to sign on with them, buy many units, and have a streamlined system for training all of their staff in CPR and first aid. Well, they also wanted to do a campaign to target individual employees whose employer had not yet signed on with any particular provider. The employer was just telling all employees, go get your CPR certification card and just give me the card.
Yeah.
Well, oftentimes those employees say, or employers, sorry, say, employee, it's your responsibility to pay for this. So what my client did was they put together this basically letter, this template letter that the employee could give to their employer saying, hey, look, this is why you should reimburse me for the cost of my CPR certification. And when employees used that resource, gave it to their employer, not only did they get reimbursed for their CPR certification card, but then the employer thought, wow, this employee's savvy. This is very smart. This is very well written. This is great. They made that person look good.
Yeah.
And you have to think about, and again, empathy, you have to put yourself in their shoes and you have to think about what does this person really want? Not just in their job, their role, their job
Hmm.
title, but in life. Do they want to look good? Do they want to seem as though or be recognized for contributing to the organization? Do they want to leave some kind of legacy behind?
Hmm.
What are they really wanting on that deep impact level? If you
Yeah.
can contribute to that ego, you're
Yeah.
going to activate endorphins and they are going to trust you.
I love that because that's such a big part, especially like, again, going back to when I've had tech clients. It's like, it's not about the platform you're putting in. And it's also not about the fact that they're paying for your product from not their own wallet, but from their company's budget. It's how will this decision make them look within
Yes.
the organization? Will it help advance their career? Will it help them get a promotion? Will it help them leave a legacy within the company that they've actually transformed with the way the company does something? And we're seeing a lot of that actually right now in the age of AI
Yes.
with innovators within the company, not just wanting to implement AI solutions and transform the way the company does work, but they want to leave a legacy of I am part of this revolution and I am leading my company through this change.
Right. And
And
the
that
thing,
has, that makes the difference between, well, we're comparing three different solutions and this one might not tick all the boxes, but if it can help me leave my legacy, then I might go with them, right? If it
right.
has the know, like, and trust factor.
Exactly. And in this, the trust building aspect is best activated when somebody's putting themselves out there. They're taking a risk, whether it's the gatekeeper who's saying, hey, these top three companies are the ones I think you should consider, but this third one right here, this is the one I'm really leaning towards, and here's why. And
Yeah.
you've enabled them to look really great to the CEO, CFO, CRO, whoever's making the decision. And
Yeah.
then likewise, if that CRO signs off on making that purchase, they need to look good to the board. And so they're
Yeah.
putting themselves out there. They're saying, I'm making this recommendation, I'm
Hmm.
making this choice. Now, as the company who was lucky enough to be chosen by these decision makers and gatekeepers, it's your job to deliver on what you promised and make sure that you take care of the people who had your back. And when you do that, you can start seeding it with these little tools, like the example of the client I gave.
Uh-huh.
But you also need to do that in your service delivery and your client reputation, which is why marketing goes all the way through the retention process.
Right, right. Okay, so let's talk about the dark side of this a little bit
Yes,
because,
yes.
often what you hear is leveraging empathy in marketing can be manipulative and
Mm,
deceptive.
mhm.
So, how do you help your clients avoid that?
Yeah. Okay. So it's easy. Honestly, frankly, it's easy because what someone's talking about when they say the dark side and they're saying, oh, if we use empathy and we put all this emotional language in there, we're playing on people's emotions, we're trying to manipulate them. The way to figure out if what you're doing is ethical or not is put yourself on the receiving end of it. If I received this advertisement, if I received this email, is it going to make me feel bad? Like FOMO, scarcity, peer pressure, anything like that? Then yes, that is the dark side.
Hmm.
If it's making you feel something good, which good things can only activate
Hmm.
oxytocin and dopamine and endorphins. If it's making you feel good, like, oh, they get it. I feel understood. I feel seen. Okay, that's positive. So it's
Right.
all about the outcome of how you're making people feel. And this is so important to talk about because companies have the power with a single push of the publish button to affect thousands, millions of lives.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that before you do that, you are using empathy to see how is this going to make people feel?
Right.
And there's been research that shows that if you make people feel bad, you actually burn that bridge. They don't trust you. And your advertisements are actually less memorable than advertisements that make you feel good.
Well, let's square that though, because we do hear a lot about, and we do see a lot of advertising and marketing that speaks to pain points, that
Hmm.
speaks to FOMO,
Yes.
and it has been effective, right? I'm recalling like way back several years ago, Volkswagen, I think it was Volkswagen, maybe it was Subaru, can't remember. It was a car company that basically showed cars crashing
Mm,
and the fact that their the drivers of those cars survived,
yes.
but it was sort of a negative, like this happens when you go and drive, right? Or if you look at the famous example is the ASPCA with their ads that I
Oh,
can't even watch. I have to turn the
I
channel
can't
because
watch
I'm a
them
huge
either.
dog lover, but it's
Right.
obviously been effective for them
Mhm.
in raising money. So where do
Mm.
you what's your take on that?
So, so here's the thing. When you
Yeah.
use those negative tactics, like let's take the ASPCA one because
Mhm.
my heart is cracking just thinking
I
about it. I could
know, I
hear the
know. I
song
can't
and
even.
Sarah
I know.
McLaughlin. I hate those things. It works in the short term.
Mm,
So someone might see that commercial and go, "Oh my God, I feel so guilty. I have to help. Let me go pledge $15." And then the next time that ASPCA commercial comes on, what do? They know what's coming, so they change the channel because they
yeah.
don't want to feel bad. So,
Right.
yes, you got their money once, but you're
Right.
not going to win their loyalty. You might win the sale. And this is
Right.
why things like flash sales and influencer marketing and things like that are effective short term. But you
Yeah.
constantly have to be coming up with new ways of pressuring people into buying from you. Now, on the
Right.
flip side, I would say Subaru did the opposite.
Yeah.
I would say that the Subaru commercial, that
Because it
is
showed a good
actually
outcome. Yeah.
right, exactly. And it makes you feel like, oh, not only did this company educate me about how dangerous car crashes actually could be, but also they provided a solution. They
Yeah.
didn't just flash the problem in front of my face.
Right.
They showed me that this is a problem. It's something every, for example, parent who has a teenager who's learning to drive worries about.
Uh-huh.
And they're giving me the solution and they're saying, we care about you. We want you to be safe.
Yeah.
We are building machines that are designed to keep your loved ones inside safe. To
Yeah.
me, that is a very good use of empathy. And
Yeah.
they really are providing, if they were providing, flimsy little
Yeah.
Tonka cars, that's
Yeah.
another story, but they're delivering on the promise. So
Right.
that's an effective, positive, ethical use of empathy, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, I think it's just it comes down to can you deliver on that promise?
Right.
And if you're leveraging emotion to help a prospective ideal client or customer
Hmm.
understand that you get them, but then you get their money and you don't deliver, that's where it becomes unethical. The other thing for me is also you're speaking to whom you're speaking to. And it's not about manipulating someone who has no need for your product or service to spend money on it. It's
Exactly.
about targeting the people that do have the need.
Yes.
They just don't realize that you have the right solution for them. And
Exactly.
so it's different than convincing someone to buy something they don't need or want.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing with, and the difference here is if the person who bought the Subaru next sees the commercial, they're going to go, hey, honey, this is that commercial that made
Yeah.
me want to get that
Yeah.
car for our teenager who's now learning to drive.
Yeah.
Like, look, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody sees the ASPCA commercial or the ads on Facebook and they go, oh gosh, get that away from me right now. It makes me feel awful.
Right.
That's
Right.
the difference.
Right. Right. I love it. Oh my gosh. So, so great. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about with you before we wrap up is the importance of feedback loops
Yes.
and talk about what that is and what that looks like within an organization and the role that they fulfill in ensuring that we stay connected and empathetic with our ideal customers and clients.
So you hit the nail on the head right there when you said the word stay. So this is the thing, as marketers, and especially you and me, we could talk about empathy and marketing and language and branding all day long.
All day long.
And the thing is, it's not something that you just do once, though,
Yeah.
because the people that we're trying to connect with are living, breathing human beings who are evolving every single day. The companies that we work with or represent are living entities with people changing goals, changing. They're driven by humans. So they're changing every single day.
Hmm.
The world that we live in, the society we live in, the words that we use are evolving every single day. And so, how are you supposed to stay on top of that? You need to create these feedback loops with the people who are front and center with the primary source. So, as marketers, oftentimes we're observers or we're out there trying to collect information, collect insights from the primary sources. Whenever I go into a new company and start working with them, I always set up these feedback loops between sales and marketing and between customer service or service delivery and marketing,
Hmm.
because those teams are the primary source. So, for example, between sales and marketing, the sales reps are the ones hearing all the objections, saying, oh, well, I really want to do this, but my boss is hesitant. Suddenly, right there, when someone says that, you know what the gatekeeper wants versus what the decision maker wants.
Right.
You have to tap into that language,
Yeah.
pull it into marketing, place it in your buyer journey at the right point to preemptively address those objections. And when you do that, you actually end up building these marketing funnels, which I would always argue marketing's job is not to sell, marketing's job is to pre sell. And when you create these feedback loops, you get those prospects 80 to 90% pre sold so that having a sales call with a rep is just a formality. It's just ironing out and hammering out the details. That's
Yeah.
all. The sales should be selling, not
Yeah.
convincing. Marketing should be doing all of that resistance breakdown.
Oh, I love that so much because I talk a lot about when you're trying to build an empathetic brand in a digital world, it's about getting out there and talking to your ideal customers and clients and not sitting in an
Yes.
ivory tower making decisions in a boardroom that
Yes.
impact who they are and their lives. And so when you're able to ask and then echo back how they describe the problem, how they describe the benefits they seek, even when I've worked with brand story clients on how do they describe you? What do they describe? I know what you want to say, and I know you want to use all this jargon to like please the analysts or please the press, but how do your clients
Yeah.
actually talk about you to their peers? What
Right.
kind of solution do they say you provide? And let's use that to our advantage to say, if we can ask and echo back the empathetic impact you get is that someone sees your marketing and goes, "Oh my gosh, that's the voice in my head.
Yes,
That's
that's the
exactly
language
how
I
I
use.
talk about the problem, right? Or
Yes.
talk about the solution." I know, even things I've bought or courses I've signed up for, it's because they've actually articulated the problem in the exact way that I have articulated it in my own
Yes.
head. And I'm
Yes.
like, okay, they get me.
Exactly. And I
Right.
would add that layers in an element of humanization to industries that are often overly clinical, overly articulated.
Right.
I work in B2B tech and SaaS primarily in e-learning, and it's so easy for leaders within these companies to overcomplicate the explanation of what
Oh,
they do. But
yeah.
when you create these feedback loops and you tap into the language that either your ideal potential customers or clients or your existing customers or clients on the service delivery and customer service sides
Yeah.
are already using, you get this very colloquial, relaxed, casual way of phrasing things that's
Approachable.
exactly, it's
Yeah.
approachable and it makes people feel like you're on an even playing field, which again makes them trust you. It makes them feel like they are
Yeah.
home.
For sure. I mean, and you can probably relate to this if I hear one more time about like we provide best in breed technology.
Oh,
I always
what
say to my
does that
clients,
mean?
do you think they're at the bar drowning in their drink, complaining about how hard things are, saying, what I really need is a best in
Best in
breed
breed.
technology solution? They're not
Yes.
saying that. I mean, maybe you
No.
use less of the colorful language they might be using,
Right.
but explain what you do instead of
Yeah.
throwing in and then save the keywords for SEO, save the
Right.
keywords for the web page or whatever. But when you're actually giving a pitch or you're doing an ad or you're creating an email, talk how your customer talks. And sometimes
Yes.
that is, it might be you might be in a very scientific academic field where they are using a lot of jargon or shorthand, and that's okay.
Yes.
But when you're using it in a way that people can't understand what you're talking about, it's not super helpful for
Exactly.
connection. So,
Exactly.
oh my gosh, Ray, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for talking to us today about the psychology behind all this and actually providing us some solutions on I've never, ever, ever had a guest or a course where someone is broken down, know, like, and trust that
Mm.
way. So
Thank you.
even that is gold. So thank you for these insights today. Thanks for you
Yeah.
for coming on the show. We're going to have all your links in the show notes, but for anyone that's exercising while they're listening right now, where's the one place they can find out more about you?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn all the time. Reach me there. My first name
Great.
is spelled kind of weird. It's Rai, Cornell, like the university. Ray Cornell on LinkedIn. You'll find me, hit me up, reach out to me. I'd love to talk
Awesome.
about this stuff. I mean, I could go for another 5 hours if you
I
want.
know
So
we
I could
could
talk
if I
about this
had
all
it,
day
I
long.
would. And I will give my LinkedIn PSA that I always do, which is don't just send her a connection request. Tell her where you heard her so she knows you're
Mm.
not trying to sell her something.
Yes, thank
Um,
you.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Empathy Edge podcast. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Please rate, review, and share it with a friend or a colleague. And until next time, please remember that cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Take care and be kind.